We are listener supported. One Radio Network. Talk to Patrick now. 888-663-6386 or email patrick@oneradionetwork.com.
Well, nothing like having your good testosterone levels on Valentine's. We're back live with you this morning. That first fellow was fun, wasn't he? Now let's up to New York, and we're going to talk with the interesting lady, Judith Ruskay Rabinor. Is it Rabinor?
Yes, it is. You pronounced it absolutely perfectly.
Oh, well, I got lucky there, Miss Rabinor. Judith Rabinor is a PhD psychologist, psychotherapist. Oh, we could use a psychotherapist. We're all so crazy.
Everybody needs a psychotherapist.
I know. Where were you when I needed you last night? Just kidding. And she's founder and director of the American Eating Disorders Center in New York City. And her latest book is Befriending Your Ex After Divorce, Making Life Better for You, Your Kids, and yes, your ex. Eating disorders to... what's the connection there, Miss Rabinor?
Well, the connection is that many of my eating disorder patients were also in the middle of divorce. Not that there's necessarily a correlation, but we do know that 50% of marriages end in divorce. So you could say 50% of any particular subcategory. 50% of radio announcers, 50% of psychotherapists, 50% of people in the real estate business, right?
Yeah, they get
probably really what compelled me to write this book was the way my own life worked out, because I'm divorced and I am a therapist, and I did wind up having a very friendly relationship with my ex, and I'm really glad I did. It didn't happen in year 1 or year 2, but over time it did happen. And I wanted to write a book about divorce, and an editor looking at my work said, well, no one really writes about, what you're talking about, which is marriage is short, but divorce is long. If you have children, the person that you're divorced from is never really out of your life, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully for the benefit of the children.
And you all had children?
Yeah, I have 2 children who are now grown, and they have children. And honestly, I don't know that I would have written this book if my daughter didn't get married a couple of years ago, because I think I had such a worry that my divorce would damage my children, and that they would, think relationships were unstable and why should they take risks. But both of them have gotten married and are parents. And relationships are not easy, but divorce does not have to be a nightmare. That is why I wrote this book.
So how did your life change when you tell us you forgave your husband for all the stuff you guys, whatever, didn't get along, and then you start getting along with him. How did your life change?
Well, the way my life changed is we started being able to do more things together and actually have a good time. That somehow what we had to do was, and this didn't happen right away, the first 10 years of our divorce, neither of us were remarried, and we were very good co-parents. I mean, we always said that we were good parents, and he always respected me as a parent, and I always respected him as a parent, even when we were married. So probably that's a prerequisite for this kind of thing. It's just that our marriage fell apart, that we just started going different ways. I mean, he was not a monster, and he would never have said that I was a monster.
Mm-hmm.
But we, like such a large number of people, just lost it. We lost the magic that kept the marriage together. And
what was that magic?
Well, that's a very good question. That'll be my next book.
Yeah.
What is the magic that keeps the marriage together?
What is that? What was that magic? I mean, go ahead and answer, and then we'll talk about that.
Well, it's just that it seems to me that you have to have the chemistry to get a relationship going. But chemistry doesn't really keep a marriage together. It keeps a relationship going. You need it to get started. But what you really need to have are similar values and a similar lifestyle, and be able to really give each other the space that you need. I mean, there's so many variables that go into what is the magic that keeps a relationship together.
Sure.
But it's a wonder any relationships stay together.
That's right. It takes a lot of everything, doesn't it?
It takes a lot of work. And most people, I know, I'm remarried, And when I said to my second husband, we're going to have to work on this, I mean, he kind of looked at me like, oh, yeah. Like, magic just evaporates. And then you have to work on the fact that you like being with the relatives all the time and he doesn't. Or he has the television. You know, there's so many things. From little tiny things like what temperature do you like the room at night when you go to sleep? That's not such a little tiny thing. I've been discussing this with people now for a couple of months since the book came out. And people get into violent difficulties about almost everything.
Do you find in your work that, well, maybe this is just an obvious question since you've written the book, that when ladies and guys do not befriend, really become friends with their ex, that their life is not, there's something not right about their life. It makes it more difficult for them. Right?
It is. That's exactly why I wrote this book. You know, it is so much easier to get along with somebody who's going to be your co-parent, period. You don't have to have the temperature in the room. You don't have to do the same thing on vacations. It doesn't matter if he watches sports all day or she talks on the phone all day. All you have to do is be good, cooperative allies around one thing, your most precious gift, your children. And what I found in my own life and have heard over and over again is that, you know, it's the usual scenario is nobody loves your children the way you and your ex and their other parent. Even if you remarry, your second spouse, wife or husband, may be very attached to your children, may care for them, may enjoy them. But that deep commitment, it's hard to replace that. So since you have an ex-spouse who happens to be the father or the mother of your children, if you can get along with this person, you've created an ally. You've created an ally so no matter whatever happens in your life or your children's life, you can count on that other person to really be there. And that makes your life different. At some place in the book I write, the secret of a good divorce is having a befriended ex. Someone that you can count on if your child is sick and you have to go out of town. Doesn't matter whose weekend it is. Somebody who really and truly deeply loves your children. And if you're able to really create and sustain that relationship, you might find that person isn't such a bad guy or isn't such a bad gal. The fact that we couldn't stay married doesn't mean they weren't a good parent. And parenting can be a stepping stone to just creating a new kind of collaboration, a new kind of friendship. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Good cooperative allies. I like the way you phrase that. It very poignant.
Very poignant. You know, I've been giving talks about this, and so no matter where I talk, someone says, I know somebody, it's 20 years later, and she's still talking about how he took her mother's oriental rug, or he didn't do this, or the guy is talking about she didn't do this. And people ask me, well, why is that? What gets in their way? And in a certain way, the answer is that it's easier to stay angry. For some people, it is impossible for them to really mourn. Divorce is a failure. It doesn't matter whether you were the initiator or you feel you were victimized. Because most people who are thoughtful know, even if one day their spouse came home and said to them, guess what, I'm leaving. Well, people ask them, didn't you have a hint? How were things before? How were you getting along? Like, do these things really come out of the blue? And the answer is no, they don't. I mean, they build up. In 95% of the cases, I guess there are some impulsive people who one day decide, I'm ending this marriage. But that's not the common story. The common story I hear is that people are very thoughtful, both about getting married and especially about getting divorced. Unfortunately, sometimes they're more thoughtful about getting divorced than they were about getting married. Right?
Yeah.
Because getting divorced is so complicated. It's complicated because children do suffer. It doesn't mean that they're damaged, and it doesn't mean they're damaged forever. But children suffer. Most people will say the day their parents told them they were getting divorced, it was a sad day. There are some kids who will say, oh, I was so glad I hated my father. He was violent. He was an alcoholic. We were all afraid of him. But that's the minority.
Sure.
That's the minority.
Sure. I would suspect that it'd be really important for the mom or dad to always speak well of the ex in the presence of the child.
That's exactly right. Just like, it's funny that you say that. When parents are married and are getting along well, if dad loses his temper and is really ranting around about something, mom might say about him, yeah, your father lost his temper. So, we all have our weak spots, or we all lose it sometimes. And would certainly frame the whole thing, yeah, your dad lost his temper. He was really mad about that, so be careful when dad's really mad. But, your dad loves you. You got to forgive him. Life is difficult, right?
Yes.
Life is difficult, and all of us don't get A+ for behavior all the time.
No, come on. We don't?
Right, exactly.
We do get an A+ for trying, don't we?
Well, if we try, and that's all you can do, is try. And but somehow we're living in a culture where when you're married, you try to defend and protect your ex. And if your partner, you protect your wife or husband when somebody says, "What did she do that for?" You say, "Well, maybe she had this in mind." But we live in a culture that divorced people get on television and say the worst things about each other. Celebrity divorces, right? A license to just badmouth and bash the other person publicly. Would you agree?
Yes. Well, I don't do TV, but I can only imagine what goes on out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Do you think it's moving towards what you're saying with people who are separating, that they're really more and more people are getting it, that it might as well be friends here because it's just silly just to hate Marge or Harold or George, or the other way in your practice?
I think that people are moving more towards recognizing that the losses of a divorce don't have to be magnified, and that, I speak to so many people. When there's like a 20-year marriage, your sister-in-law can be your best friend. Mm-hmm. And then when there's one of those old-fashioned bitter divorces where everybody in the two families stops talking to each other, people lose so much. They lose in-laws and in-law grandparents and in-law sister and brother-in-laws who were sustaining to them for a decade or two. Mm-hmm. And I think I wrote my book because I wanted to really raise consciousness, raise awareness that divorce doesn't have to be that way. That you can let go of all the bad things that you felt and that were said and that were done in many cases, not in all. Befriending is not for everyone.
How do you... go ahead. Excuse me.
Well, there are reasons that it's impossible to befriend somebody who really was cruel,
sure,
or really was or is verbally or physically abusive,
right,
to you or your children. And you would want to protect yourself from a person like this.
In those cases, you just have to cut it off.
In those cases, you have to cut it off and you have to mourn. Mm-hmm. And even those cases, the bitterness that you see in so many people, it's so destructive, not only to the kids, but to them. I mean, if you think about it, the way when you feel bitter inside, all kinds of bitter chemicals and hormones are released. And your whole body, you're all revved up. You're in that tense, anxious, angry state. And that state, when that persists for like 20 years, it's damaging to your own health. It does nothing good. So you might ask the question, so why are so many people so angry, right? Why are so many people still so angry years after? And my answer would be because they're really unwilling to look at themselves, to look at their own part, and to mourn. To mourn.
To take responsibility for it does take two to tango.
It does take two to tango, and divorce usually does not happen in a vacuum. While there are rare cases where someone says, I just didn't understand this, I thought everything was fine. If somebody, at least in my office, I'm a psychologist, so people come to me, by the time they come to me, they're in a great deal of pain. Or they're in a great deal of pain and sadness and anger. And when I say, well, let's think back, think about when you met and what it was like, and think about what it was like before your marriage fell apart, and most people can identify that it didn't start out as bad as it ended up. So what happened? And what was done about it, so many people just let things accumulate under the rug until somebody walks on the rug, breaks their leg, and says, "I'm getting out of here."
Yeah, like things kind of pile up. How do you help people to get to the point where they take responsibility for the relationship? Because it's easy to say, "Well, Sally, she was just really strange. I mean, I just, right?" But we all know that it is a two. Sometimes things just don't work. It just wasn't the right thing.
Things really don't work, exactly. And I try to, usually if I can get people to sit down and really tell the story, and I can try to get underneath, what he did wrong, and then he did this, and then he did this, and then he did that. But if I ask questions like, "And what was that like for you?" and I get them into their own feelings and their own sadness, then they start talking about how they really feel, and they realize that they have suffered a loss. It doesn't matter if this other person was crazy. Now they're out of your life. But what are you going to do with your life, with the life you have left? And most people are eventually able to understand that they're not only angry, but they're sad. And it's easier for many people to express anger than it is to express sadness.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that makes sense? It's easy for...
Oh, yeah, I would think so. It's easier to be angry than
sound
busy.
off.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Sounding off makes us feel very powerful. And being sad makes us feel very vulnerable.
Say that again?
Well, being sad makes us feel vulnerable when you're sitting around crying and feeling lonely and, admitting that you feel so lonely and admitting that even if that marriage wasn't great, it was the structure of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's over, and now you have to go create a new life. And that's usually harder than people think it is.
And so you're saying it's easier just to be angry at the other person, and then you don't have to go there where you don't want to go.
Right. And many people don't even think it's possible to become friendly with their ex. Somebody told me this. I was interviewed by a guy in Texas last week, and he said he and his wife took their son to college, and like some guy said to him, any hanky-panky, like the idea that you could just be friends with this person. It is true that you had once had a sexual relationship with them, but is it possible, people ask me, to really get rid of those feelings and just become friendly with this person? And the stories that I have heard in my book is based on well over 100 interviews that I conducted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is possible to just lose your physical attraction to that person, or even if it, you can have physical attraction to somebody, sexual attraction, you don't act on it. Every day people go to work and they say, wow, that person looks hot.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean they act on it, right?
Sure.
So it is possible to really develop a strong friendship that is based on the fact that you feel your marriage failed, but you can depend on this person to be a good parent. And that is a gift. That is a relief. That is a support. That is something in your corner, being able to know my ex will really come and do what's needed in this situation. If I have to be out of town, if I'm sick, if my child won't talk to me, maybe the child will talk to my ex.
We're talking with Judith Ruskay Rabinor. Her book is quite a long title. It's cool, though. Befriending Your Ex After Divorce, Making Life Better for You, Your Kids, and Your Ex. Patrick Timpone, OneRadioNetwork.com. We got a little special thing we're going to do next hour. Talk to you on open phones about love and life and fooling around on Valentine's Day. And we're going to be visited by a couple of folks who have a very sweet and lovely marriage, and figure out and ask them about some of the things that they do to keep things juicy, and we'll leave that as a surprise for now. Tomorrow, Open Phone Friday, we'll have 2 hours of open phones and a bunch of great guests that we'll tell you about next week that Sharon has set up. OneRadioNetwork.com. If you'd like to join the show, 888-663-6386. Email patrick@OneRadioNetwork.com. Here's an email for you, Ms. Rabinor, from Jeannie in Toronto. So how did the friendship with your ex change when you both remarried? Are you friends with your ex's wife?
That's an interesting question, because in my case, my ex's wife was very accepting of me and me of her.
Mm-hmm.
And he remarried first, and then I did. And my husband, my second husband, recently said at a gathering, he said, when I came into the family, Judy was friendly with her ex, Arnie. And Arnie and Irene were already coming over for somebody's birthday or whatever. So it was easy for me. This is not always the case. So I'm well aware of that. And it's unfortunate when there isn't, because the new spouse can really be a deterrent. The new spouse can feel threatened. So what this requires is a lot of communicating and taking one's time. And things can change over time. Sometimes a new spouse is really jealous, is insecure deep down inside, and that insecurity can create a barrier. One person told me when I said, I said to her, how does your new husband get along with your ex? She said, my new husband has to get along with my ex. He wouldn't have been my new husband if he couldn't get along with my ex.
There you go.
Because that's how important this was to me.
Sure.
When I got divorced, my commitment was to my kids, and I wanted somebody who was going to understand that us all getting along was important to me. And I didn't want to be in any one of these nightmare divorces where there's a whole lot of fighting between the parents and rivalry and envy and spitefulness and verbal bashing. So, I mean, it's kind of a word. It's a word of warning to the consumer. If you're shopping for a new spouse and you want to have a good relationship with your ex, check that out right away.
That should be very important. So how about the new spouse is cool, we found him or her, and if the other just is going to have a hard time coming around to accepting them, what are some tricks there?
What are some tricks
Or
there?
tricks are just, I don't know, no, tricks might not be a very good word for that, but some ideas that...
Yeah.
But I guess you said to take it slow and easy, getting them together, I guess.
As a new spouse who's a little wary of this whole big, expanded family.
That's right. Not too sure about this, right?
Yeah, they're not sure about this. Well, my advice would be to take your time, explain the importance, put all your cards on the table, ask your new spouse if they feel jealous, if they really trust you, if they think that there's anything left between the two of you. Because people, in my way of thinking, really benefit from getting all their dark feelings out.
Oh.
And, well, that's what therapy is about, right?
Mm-hmm,
about, people have a lot of insecurities and a lot of fears. And usually a new spouse feels uncomfortable in the presence of the ex. The children may, and probably do, love the original parent and regard the incoming parental mates as who needs them. We were fine when it was just us and mom and dad, and now they had to go bring these new people in. Children are generally not big fans of these extended families. And just like it takes the children a long time to warm up to the new person, well, it may take your new spouse a long time to warm up to the idea that for you, a goal might be that we can eventually really feel comfortable sitting together at the graduations, at the birthdays, that we could have a Thanksgiving together, that as children get older and they go away to school or they move and they come in. Divorce is sad for children and for families. It's sad for the parents when it's the second year of your divorce and your daughter is having lunch with your ex, is spending Thanksgiving Day with your ex and you're alone. And really explaining to your new spouse exactly how bad this feels and exactly what you want. And, my father used to say to me, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Oh.
And, we're all very impacted by whomever we're talking to. And I notice in talking to you, Patrick, that you have a calm, low voice, and you impact me. I start imitating you in a certain way. And this is what happens. That people do this to one another. So when things get revved up and people get agitated, they agitate one another. So it's really important to pay attention not only to what you say, but how you say it, and frame it as a request. And these are hard things to negotiate. A new spouse maybe won't be involved in every event. If the ex is there, that's also a possibility. You know, I think we're kind of rewriting. We're at a stage in civilization where we're rewriting what the family is. Marriage is on the decline. Divorce is on the increase. Are you interested in me saying a word about that?
Sure.
Well, one of the things I started really reading all this sociological research and stuff, and it said that the statistic that we keep being exposed to is that almost 50% of marriages end in divorce.
Right.
But it's actually more than that, because what was pointed out in this article is that marriage is on the decline, and that people get together, live together, have children, and then they split up. And those relationships that split up are not necessarily tabulated in the divorce statistics.
Ah, right, yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, they wouldn't be in those statistics, would they?
Exactly, and I'm thinking of two friends of mine who had children with men that they never married, but they are not called divorced from those guys. But for the children, that's a divorce.
Same thing.
Yeah, for the children, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah, something flashed on me earlier when you were talking about this, Ms. Rabinor, is that it's almost that the man or woman must get to the point of unconditional love and acceptance for their ex to then make this all work, to really forgive them for everything at a deep level, so there's no more juice, internally. Not that they just, it's not just that their actions, but deep down they just have let go of saying that, Sally or George is, And so it's almost like they have to go back to something that maybe they could have done earlier, but even if they would have done earlier, they weren't the right person anyway.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so, but they're really having to step up to forgive the other person, I think.
And even another part of this is forgiving yourself. I mean, after all, you married this person.
Yeah. Forgiving yourself for getting involved.
Forgiving yourself for making one of the biggest mistakes of your life, which had a big price ticket attached to it, right? I mean, people ask themselves, how did I marry this person? How didn't I know this? And often they'll really face the music. Well, I didn't really want to know it. I really wanted to get married. I wanted to get out of my parents' house. I wanted to have children. I didn't want to be old and be alone anymore. And so it means forgiving yourself also.
Yeah. When we do really dumb things, sometimes takes a little while to get to that point where we just forgive ourselves for doing that dumb thing. But nobody else is judging us. We might as well let it go.
We might as well let it go. I mean, that's probably the first step in learning how to forgive your ex, is learning how to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Because most people will admit that by the end of the marriage, they were so angry, they were so hurt, they were withdrawn, that these cycles of being angry and withdrawing and giving up, they usually, they are like the final stages of a deteriorating marriage. And people afterwards sometimes think about it because they learn a lot about themselves and how, maybe I'm not such a great communicator and I could have talked about this. I mean, that's why I think the new family I'm creating, step families, it is very challenging, and many people realize that the same skills that they needed in their first marriage, they need in their second marriage, and now they have a more complicated situation. They have children from 3 columns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there are more children. Then your ex gets married, and there are children that come along with the ex's new spouse, and if there are ever going to be any of these big Thanksgivings, all these people are there. That's how I start my book, with one of those Thanksgivings, where I call it an expanded, extended family. And that's what many people talk about, how hard divorce is, not only on children, not only on parents, but on grandparents, and people losing sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws that they've been close with for years, nieces and nephews that they loved, and now suddenly they're practically like banned from ever seeing them again.
Yeah.
And these are some of the things we're really trying to change.
Well, it'll be important to get in that non-judgmental forgiveness mode big time with this, right? To just forgive and forget. Let everybody, like you said, get along. Before we let you go, can you stay a few minutes longer and talk about the kids?
Sure.
Yeah. Do you talk a lot? Do you have occasion to talk with the children in all of this?
I do. And what's really amazing is how for children, divorce is always hard. It's traumatic. But the important thing is it doesn't have to be a lifelong trauma. It's always really hard for children when one parent moves out or, and everybody has to move and children have to go to new schools. And another thing that's hard is that now mom and dad are at a new place in their life and it requires a lot of energy to get your life together. You can almost say the developmental needs of the parents and the children are not the same. The children have a need for security. The children need to know, my mom and dad got divorced, but they love me. By the way, there's a wonderful Sesame Street YouTube on this, so I want to recommend it to anybody listening who has kids and are wondering. Google Sesame Street and divorce, and you'll see how the Sesame Street kid is comforted by a parent. And so children need a lot of stability and a lot of support. And if parents can provide a calm, caring, conflict-free, cooperative atmosphere and let the kids know, we didn't get along, but we love you, we will be here for you forever. That's the message kids need to get to know.
So that's the biggest thing, do you think, Ms. Rabinor, for the kids is the security and knowing that they're really loved by both?
Yes, and that they're not going to, after all, they have just witnessed the breakup. And if dad could walk away from mom, maybe he'll walk away from me. Or if mom can walk away from dad. And they need to really know that my loyalty to you is eternal. Eternal. I will always be there for you. And what kids need to do is they need to witness this. The words are one thing, but creating schedules where parents are predictable and reliable and calm and keep their negative feelings to themselves and keep all their adjustment problems to themselves, that's the recommendation for parents. And there's one more thing I want to get in before this show ends, and that is many parents feel like when you get divorced, your job is to be a very good parent to your children, and that's true. But I expand upon that. Your job is to help your child have two parents. Your job is to make room for the other parent. You may have disliked this person and said, I want nothing more to do with him. I don't want to be married to him or her. That's fine. But your child needs that parent as a parent. And your job is not to badmouth them, not to pick them apart, to really make room for them, to be compassionate to the needs of your child. Even if your ex was not perfect, not that you're perfect, that's the parent that they have. And you need to know deep down inside that there may be no one in this world who ever loves your child more than you and your ex. And your ex is to be valued for that. And you can encourage your ex to be a better parent, just as you could when you were married.
And I guess it depends on how you say it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. You know, I think I said this just a few minutes ago. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Mm-hmm. But a married patient of mine said to me recently, my wife said to me, oh, why don't you coach Jesse's baseball team this spring? And the wife wanted him to have a better relationship with their son. You can do this when you're divorced. If you have a decent enough relationship, you can say, you know, I think Jesse is really going through a period where you doing something special with him would really matter a lot. You can be collaborative co-parents, it's not just the absence of friction and the absence of conflict. It's really being actively knowing that this person needs to be involved in your kid's life, wants to be involved, and you can help them be a better parent, and they can help you be a better parent. I'll just tell you a quick example. A patient of mine who's divorced and has a very good relationship with her ex. You know, we just had the most terrible Hurricane Sandy out here on Long Island, and she and her husband live around the corner from each other, but her house was trashed and his house was not. And she said to him at one point, she said, please keep the kids for a couple of weeks. I just got to get this house back in shape. I got to get the contractors in here. And he said to her, you have no heat. I have a generator. Come here and sleep here. She and her husband went over and they slept at his house with him and his wife. And this might sound like a Disney storybook, but it's not. These things are really happening. And my mission as a writer is to let people know you don't have to hate the person you once loved. You can make bitter better.
Bitter better.
Bitter better. It's in your hands.
Well, Miss Rabinor, good stuff. Good stuff. You know, you've thought about this. God love you. Good stuff.
I've thought about this a lot.
It's important. Befriending your ex after divorce, making life better for you, your kids, and yes, your ex. Well, happy Valentine to you and happy marriage to you.
Happy Valentine's to you. Happy marriage and happy marriage. Excuse me, I'm getting over the flu. Happy marriage and to a better divorce to anybody in the listening audience who's out there.
All right, my dear.
This could be a book you'd give your ex, or you might want to read yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Have a good day up there.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Remember when someone on the